Hello, public opinion aficionados, and welcome to Rasmussen Reports. Once again, the most accurate pollster. Now, we don't like to toot our horns a lot. We like to have our work speak for itself. But there are some important things to talk about now that it seems like a lot of people are calling themselves the most accurate. But you're following this channel because you know for this entire fall, we nailed exactly what was going on in the race. But this video is specifically about deception, or how the mainstream media concocted a fake Kamala Harris lead built on the backs of literally the worst pollsters in the industry, pollsters who time and time again have shown that they've overstated Democrat support, especially when Trump is on the ballot. And that exact same thing played out again. And the only reason you know it is because of Rasmussen reports. But let's get to accuracy quick. We have updated numbers and also a new chart showing how well we did in the Senate. Here is our updated state polling. You can take a screenshot of this if you'd like. Otherwise, you could probably find it linked in our article on Rasmussen that I'm about to show you. Okay, so these numbers changed a little bit. Here is our updated battleground calls, and we got 6 of the 7 called for the right candidate. The only one we missed was Michigan. It was a Harris 0.8 on average within the margin of error. We got 6 of the 7 within the margin of error. The only one we missed was Arizona, and we were off by 3.5. That's down from over 4 before. Thanks for all that extra counting, Ruben Gallego. And 5 of the 7 final polls here were within the margin of error. And I will say, notice that our final poll was October 29th. We didn't do any polling after that because, quite honestly, over half the country had already voted and people were dropping out of the panels. The panels were exhausted. The polling was not accurate. In fact, as we'll see in a second, our most accurate polling was October 15th. I think you should really be suspect about anybody who is calling themselves accurate based on a call they put out 11-4, for instance, because by then, really everybody kind of knew that Trump was going to sweep the battlegrounds. Here's the average polling error, 0.7%, really good, to Harris. We are not a right-wing pollster. There are no right-wing pollsters. And our final call error was actually 0.2% to Harris. So basically, no bias whatsoever. We were too favorable to Harris on this one. Arizona, too favorable to Trump in Georgia. It's all basically a wash. Now, across all the states, this is amazing. We got 13 out of 14 called for the right candidate. Again, Michigan. And we got, 10 out of 14 within the margin of error on average, and 9 out of 14 final calls within the margin of error. Again, our October 15th, September 23rd polling was our best polling across 14 states, 0.5%, again, to Harris. And the final call, literally zero bias. Perfect. Now, we put this out here. This is a little bit streamlined if you want to screenshot this instead. But what this has is our absolute error, the absolute value of the error. And on average, across all the states, it was 2.3%. Across the swing states, it was 1.5%. It's really hard to get below 2 because these polls do have a plus or minus 3% margin of error. So this means that on average, we were well within the margin of error on these states. Now, this is all of our state polling. Each one of these lines is a different set. The lighter the color, the farther back it was. And you can see the shape here. It's like, yeah, our weighting and how we built the demographics for each state was a little off, and there was polling errors. So you see, like, there was a lot of variation on our Georgia polling, not a lot in Arizona, which is kind of weird. Wisconsin was sort of all over the map, but again, zero bias. This is what you'd expect to see if somebody's putting out, real polling numbers. Some states they do well on, others they don't. Some of the polls are kind of all over the place. That's why you would aggregate polling like Real Clear Politics did in order to try and smooth out the polling error. But then, of course, as we all know, and what we're going to look at later, is the entire industry always inserts anti-Trump bias. But basically, here's the Senate numbers, and we did really well. Senate races are really hard to call, and you can see a lot of blue here, and that's because Republicans got wrecked down ballot, even though we nailed the generic ballot. We were within, I think, 0.1%. Our final generic ballot was Republicans +3. I think they got 3.1 maybe, according to Cook. I don't know. You can correct me if I'm wrong. It's really impossible to get more accurate from a generic ballot standpoint. But, we were accurate in 2022 pretty well also. So here are the Senate results. In the battlegrounds, we got 4 of the 5 called for the correct candidate. And that's because McCormick just barely eked out Pennsylvania. We got 4 of the 5 within the margin of error. The one we didn't was Nevada. And yeah, we had Sam Brown down quite a lot against Jackie Rosen. It was a lot tighter race. And that's because Trump overperformed in Nevada. Final call within the margin of error, the same. Our average error was 2 points, too favorable to the Democrat candidates. And we said this many times, that Republicans would outperform our polling, but it was just a matter of how much. And here it was only enough to get McCormick over the hump. Isn't that weird? Probably has something to do with a lot of the counting in the blue areas in the battlegrounds, I would have to say. Our final poll error was much tighter than that, 0.7%, again, to the Democrats. Across all the states, how many is this? There were 11 states, and we got 9 of the 11 for the correct candidate. That's because, and I knew Moreno was going to win, but look, we had our final call as Moreno +1, but we had this Brown +5 back in August that dragged our average down. And then again, Pennsylvania. So now our average polling within the margin of error, it was, 7 out of 11. Pretty good. The ones we missed again were Rosen, Moreno again, Ted Cruz. Yeah, we pulled Texas, and Texas went way more red than we thought. We had Cruz +4. Texas really got us with our other accuracy numbers. It's one of our worst ones here too. Sorry, guys. And then we had Kane up 11.5. He only did 8.2. Pretty wild. But our final calls, 9 out of the 11 of them were within the margin of error. So the early polling on the Senate races was just horrible. And of course, I don't think we can be blamed for that. I think the final polls might be more representative here. There was a lot of advertising dollars dumped in really kind of at the end. A lot of people didn't know these candidates the same way that they know Trump or Harris. And so I think it's a little bit different. But here, the average error was, again, 2 points too favorable to Democrats. And the final poll error was 1 point too favorable to Democrats. This is really good. I don't think anybody else is going to have numbers about as good as this. But here's the stuff I wanted to talk about. Go to our Rasmussen_poll Twitter feed. We just put out an article going over all of this in painstaking detail if you want to see it. It also links to the images. Here, it's on our website. While you're there, please sign up for a free daily newsletter. At least you'll keep track of all the polling that's going on if you don't want to support us a couple bucks a month as a reader. All the images, like I said, are linked, but it really goes into the narrative of what happened this cycle and about how everybody was lying. And again, how do we know that? It's because the entire season since the switcheroo, we were putting out daily numbers. Everybody else was showing all these fake trends, but we were showing week after week that Donald Trump was basically hitting 2% the entire time. There's the chart. Everybody saw it. This is the entire race. And the red line was always about 1.5 points, 2 points above the blue line. And that looks starkly different from what you saw on Real Clear Politics. Look at this absolute massive blue margin that they gave to Kamala Harris. It's really crazy. There were some better pollsters than others. If you look, we did well. But, directionally, Emerson was okay. They finished at a tie. Their state polling wasn't that bad. It was 2 left. But then there were just absolute clowns, and we're going to take a look at them. Morning Consult. Look at all this blue. Reuters Ipsos, who uses the famous Ipsos panel. They're one of the worst offenders, too. They started at Trump +1. They got all the way up to Harris +6. So here is an overlay of our polling on the Real Clear Politics aggregate. And you can see what happened after the switcheroo. Immediately, this blue line jumped up. And after that, they put a sandbag on Trump. His line moved down. We didn't really see that in the polling. This here is kind of like the post-DNC bounce/debate era. And you could say, all right, well, Trump's number went down. This might have been poll variation. This is just one data point here. But the general trend is that Trump was up here basically the whole time. And then the blue line was down even below where the industry said that Trump was. They kept saying over and over again that Trump had a ceiling at 47 because that's what they were seeing here. But the truth was, is that it was really Harris who had a ceiling at 47. Now the numbers finished a little bit higher, and that's of course because third party candidates never do as well in the real elections as they do in the polling. And of course, you have a lot less not sures. And down here, this is the real margin according to our polling as well. It was never positive for Harris once this entire time. And the biggest insertion of lies came really right at the beginning. Biden was never doing as well as the entire industry said. And Kamala Harris never really got that massive bump up that everybody showed she had. Now, here's what you're here for. This, in my opinion, is one of the more important charts that we've put out this entire election season. Is it because Morning Consult and Reuters Ipsos are the most important pollsters? No, not by a long mile. But listen, you're seeing people like Nate Silver retrospectively look back on this cycle and say, wow, the polling wasn't that bad. But here's the thing, just what people's final calls are doesn't represent the massive amount of disconnect between what was happening in the polls and what was happening in the real world, as evidenced by our polling. And so what I prepared here is a graphical representation of how different the margin that these pollsters put out compared to Rasmussen Report's margin, i.e., if we showed the race Trump +2 and you see that Real Clear Politics is at a 5 there, that means that they had at that time Harris +3. And look, I mean, this is just absolutely horrible. This is the entire election season. And Morning Consult, I mean, is really definitely a laughing stock, but you think at some point that they would get better. And here you have it at the beginning of the race. They were 8 points more favorable to Harris. You know, a positive number is more favorable to Harris than our polling was. And it got up to 9 points at the DNC. And you can see, oh, they did get lower, 4 points around the beginning of September. But then look at that post-debate bounce. They had it going all the way to 8 points again. Now, at the end, they petered out, just like Reuters Ipsos. Reuters Ipsos is just as bad here. 9 points too favorable to Harris at the anointment, 8 points too favorable to Harris basically all of September and the beginning of October. That's where it counted. That's when people were making up their decisions. That's when people were putting in mail-in ballots and getting ready to go early vote. And listen, you could say, well, look at the end. Maybe they tried to save their credibility. Maybe they herded. Maybe they thought Trump was going to win and they saw Rasmussen reports. I really do think that we are one of the reasons, because consistently, week after week, we showed the race at basically Trump +2. I really think we're one of the reasons that everybody herded at the end. They couldn't bring themselves to say that Trump was going to win, but they basically said it was basically tie. And these people were on the left. The only person that I mean was even worse was, I think, Maris came in at the end with a Harris +4, which would have been about a 6 on this chart. That's really bad. But I mean, the writing was kind of on the wall. Everybody agreed. The betting market showed Trump sweeping the swing states basically the middle of October. So even though they weren't telling you it, it was pretty clear that Trump was probably going to win. And just looking around on Twitter, I mean, the most common electoral map you saw was 312. Everybody kind of got it. And yet they all had left bias, every single one of them. Look at that red line. That's the Real Clear Politics aggregate. That's the industry. And good for them. The industry finished just barely under 2 points to Harris. But look at that 5. For all of July, August, and beginning of September, they were 4 and 5 points too favorable to Harris. All of September, October, 4 points too favorable to Harris. That's the entire industry. There are no right-wing pollsters at all. So pretty horrifying. If you know people who were upset or confused by the state of the polling industry this cycle, show them this video, because I really think only by helping people know that you can't trust anything that comes out of the mainstream media's mouth are we going to get to a situation where things are more accurate. Maybe this was just a Trump thing. I don't know. Maybe finally, after 3 cycles of lying to keep this man out of office, people will suddenly become introspective and fix the problems that they have over and over again. But I can tell you things are changing. Now, Twitter drives the core of dialogue around politics in this country in a way that it didn't even just a month ago. And people are starting to become more open to us here at Rasmus. And I can tell you there's a lot more interest in our polling business than there was over the last 4 years for certain. And we even got contacted from the American Association of Public Opinion Research. And that's absolutely crazy because those people ostracized us for at least a decade. So maybe we're entering a new era, and you can thank Rasmussen reports for that. But what I can tell you is for the next 4 years, there are going to be a lot of awfully interesting things to poll on, including today, new numbers about Trump's cabinet appointments, and you're not going to want to miss them. So follow us on YouTube or Rumble at Rasmussen_poll. Hit us up at Twitter, Mark_R_Mitchell, or Rasmussen_poll there as well. And thanks for watching.